The hydrothermal vents recording shouldn't have contained anything remarkable. Nathan Rhodes had analyzed hundreds of these deep-sea audio samples before, each one filled with the expected sounds, bubbling water, shifting tectonic plates, and the occasional whale song. But this one was different. "Play it again," he muttered to himself, adjusting the frequency analyzer in his dimly lit lab at the Oceanic Research Institute. The holographic display flickered, casting ethereal blue light across his stubbled face. At 34, Nathan had already earned a reputation as one of the leading experts in quantum acoustics, though his colleagues often joked that he spent more time with sound waves than people. The recording started again. Beneath the normal oceanic noise, there was something else, a pattern that shouldn't exist. It was as if someone had encoded information into the very fabric of sound itself, using frequencies that seemed to fold in on themselves. Nathan's fingers danced across the holographic interface, isolating the anomalous pattern. His dark eyes narrowed as the mathematical representation materialized before him, a cascade of equations that defied conventional physics. "Dr. Rhodes," the voice startled him. Lyra Bennett, his research assistant, stood in the doorway, her copper-colored hair tied back in a messy bun. "It's almost midnight. You should get some rest." "Lyra, come look at this," Nathan said, barely containing his excitement. "These patterns, they're not random noise. They're structured, almost like..." "Like what?" Lyra moved closer, her green eyes scanning the data. "Like a language, but not any language we know. The mathematical complexity suggests it's been deliberately engineered at a quantum level." Lyra frowned. "That's impossible. We don't have technology that can do that. Nobody does." "Exactly." Nathan pulled up another visualization. "And here's the really strange part. When I try to model these frequencies in four-dimensional space-time, they appear to create localized temporal distortions." "You're saying these sounds can affect time?" Lyra's skepticism was evident in her voice. "Theoretically. But to test it, we'd need to recreate the exact frequency pattern." Nathan's fingers moved again, programming the lab's quantum synthesizer. "I've isolated what I think is the core sequence." "Nathan, wait." Lyra grabbed his wrist. "Maybe we should run more analyses first, if you're right about this." But Nathan had already initiated the sequence. The lab speakers emitted a sound unlike anything either of them had ever heard, a tone that seemed to exist between moments, making their very atoms shiver. The air in the center of the lab began to ripple like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. Nathan felt a pressure building in his ears, and the holographic displays started glitching wildly. "Shut it down," Lyra shouted, but Nathan couldn't move. The rippling air had become a vortex of light, and through it, he could see something. Images flashing too fast to process. Cities he didn't recognize, machines that couldn't exist, and faces that seemed both ancient and yet to be born. The vortex collapsed in on itself with a thunderous crack, leaving behind a small object that clattered to the floor. Nathan approached it cautiously, a device about the size of his palm, made of materials he couldn't identify. Its surface was covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change as he watched. "What is it?" Lyra whispered, her face pale. Before Nathan could answer, the device activated. A holographic message sprang to life, showing a woman's face. Her eyes held a haunted look, and her voice carried the weight of desperate urgency. "If you're receiving this, you've discovered the quantum frequency. Listen carefully. Everything depends on what you do next. They're coming for it. Hide it. Trust no one. When the time is right, you'll understand." The message flickered out. Nathan and Lyra stared at each other in stunned silence. The lab's emergency lights suddenly flashed red, and the security system blared to life. "Multiple unauthorized entries detected," the AI system announced. "Unknown entities have breached the facility perimeter." Through the lab's windows, Nathan could see black-clad figures moving across the Institute's grounds with military precision. In the distance, unmarked helicopters descended from the night sky. "Lyra, help me save everything to the quantum drive." Nathan's hands flew across the holographic interface, downloading his research. "Then we need to go. Now." "Go where?" Lyra asked, already moving to help him. "I don't know." Nathan pocketed the mysterious device. "But whoever sent this message just changed everything we thought we knew about reality. And I have a feeling those people outside aren't here to collaborate on research." The sound of boots in the hallway grew closer. Nathan grabbed Lyra's hand, and they slipped out through the lab's emergency exit. As they disappeared into the darkness, neither of them noticed the strange device beginning to pulse with an inner light, counting down to something that would change not just their lives, but the very nature of time itself. Behind them, the Institute's lights flickered and died, plunging the world into darkness. And somewhere, in a time yet to come, events set in motion millennia ago began to accelerate toward their inevitable conclusion. 3 days after fleeing the Institute, Nathan and Lyra found themselves in an abandoned subway station beneath downtown Seattle. Their temporary sanctuary was illuminated by the soft glow of emergency lights and Lyra's jury-rigged quantum computer setup. The device's energy signature is getting stronger, Lyra reported, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed their sleepless nights. Whatever it's counting down to, I think it's happening soon. Nathan nodded, studying the mysterious artifact they'd recovered. The symbols on its surface had been shifting more frequently, forming patterns that seemed almost familiar now. Have you made any progress decoding the language? It's not just one language, Lyra said, pulling up a complex analysis grid. It's hundreds, maybe thousands, all layered together. Like someone tried to ensure it could be understood across vast stretches of time. A distant rumble made them both freeze. Since their escape, they'd been pursued relentlessly by the same black-clad operatives who'd raided the Institute. Every safe house they'd found had been compromised within hours. We should move again, Nathan suggested, but Lyra shook her head. Look at this. She projected a larger hologram showing energy readings from the device. These patterns, they're identical to what we recorded from the deep-sea vent. But they're not just similar, they're exactly the same, down to the quantum level. That's statistically impossible unless they're the same signal, Nathan finished, separated by time instead of space. The device suddenly pulsed with brilliant light, and the air around them began to shimmer. Nathan reached for Lyra instinctively, pulling her behind him as reality itself seemed to bend and twist. A figure stepped through the distortion, a woman in her late 30s, wearing what looked like a suit of liquid metal. Her dark skin was marked with gleaming circuitry patterns, and her eyes held the weight of centuries. Dr. Rhodes. Ms. Bennett. Her voice carried an accent they couldn't place. I'm Dr. Olivia Winter. I've come from the year 2487, and we don't have much time. Nathan and Lyra exchanged glances. After everything they'd seen, a time traveler hardly seemed impossible anymore. The device, Olivia continued, gesturing to the artifact. It's called a temporal beacon. We created it. We'll create it, as a last resort. The signal you found in the ocean? That was just one of thousands we scattered across history, hoping someone would find it in time. In time for what? Lyra asked, her scientific skepticism warring with the evidence before her eyes. To prevent the collapse. Olivia's expression darkened. In my time, we discovered something we shouldn't have, a way to manipulate the quantum fabric of reality itself. We thought we could use it to solve our energy crisis, to heal our dying planet. Instead, we created tears in the universe, wounds in time that are spreading, unraveling everything. The military team hunting us, Nathan said. They're from your time too. The Chronos Initiative. They believe they can control the collapse, use it as a weapon. They're wrong. Olivia pulled up her own holographic display, showing cascading patterns of reality breaking down. The tears are growing exponentially. In my timeline, we have less than a month before everything, past, present, and future, ceases to exist. A crash echoed through the subway tunnel. Flashlight beams pierced the darkness. They followed me. Olivia cursed. Dr. Rhodes, that device contains everything you need to understand what's coming. The quantum frequency you discovered? It's not just a message, it's a key. The only way to seal the tears is to create a temporal resonance cascade, but it has to be initiated from multiple points in time simultaneously. That's why you scatter the signals through history, Lyra realized. You're trying to coordinate actions across different time periods. Yes, but the Chronos Initiative is trying to stop us. They've been eliminating temporal nodes, people like you who found the signals, one by one. Olivia handed Nathan a small crystal. This contains coordinates to others who've received the message. Find them. The resonance has to be perfect, or it will only make things worse. The flashlight beams grew closer. Olivia's form began to flicker. My temporal anchor is failing. Remember, the frequency isn't just sound. It's her voice cut off as she vanished, leaving behind only a fading ripple in the air. Freeze. Armed figures in black tactical gear emerged from the darkness. Hand over the device. Now. Nathan clutched the temporal beacon tighter, backing away with Lyra. The device's pulsing had reached a fever pitch, its symbols swirling faster than ever. Nathan, Lyra whispered, look at the energy readings. The holographic display showed massive temporal distortions building around them. The Chronos operatives raised their weapons, but before they could fire, reality twisted again. This time, the distortion wasn't contained. The entire subway station seemed to fold in on itself, and Nathan felt a sensation like falling through infinite space. The last thing he saw was Lyra's hand reaching for his as the world dissolved into quantum chaos. When the darkness cleared, they were standing in the same subway station, but the emergency lights were gone, replaced by pristine fixtures. The walls were clean, the air fresh. And through the station windows, they could see a city that looked nothing like the Seattle they knew. Nathan? Lyra's voice shook slightly. When are we? Before he could answer, a public hologram flickered to life nearby, displaying the date, March 15th, 2186. They had jumped forward more than 160 years. The temporal beacon hummed in Nathan's hand, its symbols now forming a clear message. Find the others. Begin the resonance. Time is running out. The Seattle of 2186 was a maze of crystalline towers and quantum roads that twisted impossibly through the air. Nathan and Lyra moved through crowded streets, trying to blend in despite their outdated clothing. The temporal beacon had gone quiet, but the crystal from Olivia pulsed with a soft blue light. According to these coordinates, Lyra whispered, studying a holographic projection from the crystal. The next temporal node should be in that building. She pointed to a spiraling structure that seemed to defy gravity, its surface rippling like liquid metal. The Quantum Research Institute, Nathan read from a floating sign. At least some things stay consistent across time. They approached the building's entrance, where a biometric scanner hummed softly. Lyra pulled out a device she'd cobbled together from their quantum computer. This should fool thee. Don't move. The voice came from behind them, quiet but commanding. Turn around slowly. They turned to face a woman in her early 40s, her silver-streaked black hair pulled back tightly. She wore the uniform of a QRI researcher, but her stance suggested military training. Dr. Samira Patel, she said, keeping her hand near what looked like a weapon at her hip. And you're not from this time period. Nathan tensed, ready to run, but Lyra stepped forward. We're looking for someone who received a quantum frequency signal. A temporal node. Samira's expression shifted subtly. Inside. Now. Before they notice us. She led them through back corridors to a secure laboratory, where complex equipment filled the space. On a central display, Nathan recognized the same frequency patterns they discovered in their own time. You found the signal too, he said. 2 years ago. Samira activated a privacy field around the lab. I thought I was going mad until Dr. Winter made contact. But the Chronos Initiative, she stopped, looking at them sharply. You've met her. 3 days ago. We're about 160 years from now, depending on your perspective, Lyra said. She told us about the temporal tiers. Samira nodded grimly. They're already starting here. Look. She pulled up a series of images showing reality-bending anomalies across the globe. The initiative claims they can control them, use them to reshape history. They've infiltrated every major research facility, including this one. How do they have so much influence across different time periods? Nathan asked. Because they're not just from one future, a new voice said. They turned to see a young man entering the lab, early 20s, with features that seemed to shift slightly when viewed directly. They're from multiple possible futures, all working together. This is Marcus, Samira explained. He's complicated. I'm a temporal echo, Marcus said. A shadow of someone who existed in a timeline that's already been erased. There used to be thousands of us, but now. He gestured to the anomaly images. The tiers are eliminating entire probability streams. Soon, there won't be any alternate futures left. The temporal beacon suddenly activated, projecting a complex series of equations into the air. Lyra gasped. These numbers, she said, they're not just coordinates. They're fragments of a larger equation, the resonance cascade formula. Each temporal node has a piece, Samira confirmed. But we need all of them to make it work. And we need to activate it simultaneously across every time period. An alarm blared through the building. Marcus's form flickered violently. They're here, he said. The initiative found, his voice cut out as his entire body destabilized, quantum particles scattering into nothing. Marcus. Samira reached for him, but her hand passed through empty air. His timeline, Lyra realized. It must have been erased. Security doors slammed shut around the lab. Through the windows, they could see armed figures approaching, some in modern tactical gear, others wearing technology that hadn't been invented yet. The resonance equipment, Samira said urgently, moving to a sealed chamber. We need to destroy it before they get it. The initiative can't be allowed to control all the nodes. She began overloading the quantum core as Nathan and Lyra gathered what data they could. The temporal beacon's pulsing grew stronger, synchronizing with the destabilizing equipment. Lyra, the equations. Nathan called out. Are they saved? Got them. But she was cut off by an explosion that rocked the lab. Initiative forces burst through multiple entry points. You can't stop this, their leader said, his augmented eyes glowing with artificial light. The tears are inevitable. We're just choosing who controls them. You're wrong, Samira said. She looked at Nathan and Lyra. Find the others. Complete the cascade. Then she slammed her hand down on the overload trigger. The quantum core detonated in a blast of temporal energy. Nathan felt Lyra grab his hand as reality warped around them. The temporal beacon activated automatically, pulling them into another time jump just as Samira's lab collapsed into a singularity. They materialized in a barren landscape under a blood-red sky. The air was thick with quantum particles, and in the distance, they could see massive tears in space-time, reality peeling away like old wallpaper. When are we? Nathan asked, his voice hoarse. Lyra checked their systems, her face paling. 2487. This is Olivia's time. The end of everything. The temporal beacon displayed a new message. 2 nodes remaining. Time horizon approaching. Choose wisely. In the fractured sky above them, the tears in reality grew larger, consuming stars and leaving behind absolute nothing. The final countdown had begun. The ruins of 2487 stretched endlessly beneath the dying sky. Nathan and Lyra made their way through the quantum-scarred landscape, following the beacon's signal toward the last resistance stronghold, a massive structure that seemed to exist partially out of phase with normal space-time. Look. Lyra pointed to shimmering apparitions that flickered around them, ghost images of buildings, people, and entire cities that had once existed and now raised timelines. We're seeing temporal echoes. Like Marcus. More than echoes, a familiar voice said. Olivia Winter emerged from the structure's entrance, looking older than when they'd last seen her. Their memories. The last fragments of deleted realities. Inside the stronghold, they found a chamber filled with temporal technology far beyond anything they'd seen. Dozens of people worked at quantum terminals, monitoring the growing tears in space-time. Welcome to the resonance chamber, Olivia said. The last refuge of those fighting to save what's left of time itself. Dr. Winter, another scientist, called out urgently. The temporal tears, they're accelerating. We've lost contact with the 2349 node. Olivia's face tightened. How many are left? Including this one? 3. Here, 2186, in the origin point. Samira, Nathan said quietly. She sacrificed herself to protect the equation. Many have. Olivia led them to a central platform where a massive hologram displayed the interweaving timelines. But now we know the truth. The frequency, the tears, the initiative, it's all connected to something we never expected. The hologram zoomed in on a particular quantum signature. Lyra gasped. That's impossible. This pattern, it's human brainwave activity. Not just any human, Olivia said. Yours, Nathan. Or rather, your original selves. What do you mean, original self? The quantum frequency you discovered? You created it. Not you now, but you in a timeline that no longer exists. A version of you who found a way to encode human consciousness into temporal waves. Nathan stared at the pattern, feeling an impossible familiarity. Why would I do that? Because you saw this coming. All of it. The tears aren't random accidents, they're immune responses. Reality itself is trying to prevent something worse. A massive tremor shook the facility. Through the windows, they could see new tears forming, reality peeling away to reveal the void beneath. The initiative found us, someone shouted. Multiple temporal incursions. Armed figures began appearing throughout the chamber, shifting between different time periods as they attacked. The resistance fighters responded with quantum weapons, the battle warping local space-time with each shot. The resonance cascade, Lyra said, pulling up the completed equation. If what you're saying is true, it won't just seal the tears, it'll reset everything. Not reset, Olivia corrected, deflecting an attack with a temporal shield. Transform. Evolution on a universal scale. But it has to be initiated by the same consciousness that created the frequency. Nathan looked at the temporal beacon, understanding finally clicking into place. That's why the initiative wants to stop us. They don't want evolution, they want control. Nathan. Lyra's warning came too late. A quantum burst struck him, sending him tumbling through fractured space-time. As he fell, memories that weren't his own flooded his mind, countless versions of himself, across countless timelines, all working toward this moment. He saw himself discovering the frequency, encoding his consciousness, scattering the signals across history. He saw the initiative corrupting his work, trying to use it to dominate all of reality. And he saw what would happen if they succeeded. When he came back to himself, he was in Olivia's medical bay, Lyra holding his hand. The battle still raged outside. How long was I? Time is meaningless here, Olivia said. But the tears are nearly at critical mass. We have to act now. Nathan sat up, his head spinning with new understanding. We need to get to the origin point. My lab, where it all started. The temporal beacon can take us, Lyra said. But the initiative. They'll follow us. Olivia handed them each a quantum weapon. I'll hold them here. Find your past self signal. Complete the cascade. Before they could argue, she activated a temporal field, pushing them toward the beacon's coordinates. The last thing they saw was Olivia facing down a wave of initiative forces, time itself bending around her. The beacon activated, and reality dissolved once more. But this time, Nathan knew where they were going, and what they would find there. Back to the beginning. Back to the deep-sea vent where a version of himself had hidden the most dangerous and important message in human history. The question was, could they reach it before the initiative? And more importantly, should they? The deep-sea research facility looked exactly as Nathan remembered, though now he understood it with different eyes. He and Lyra materialized in his old lab moments after their past selves had fled, alarms still blaring through the complex. Strange, seeing it again, Lyra said, moving to the quantum analyzers. Feels like a lifetime ago. In some ways, it was. Nathan approached the spot where he'd first played the frequency. The air still rippled with temporal energy. We need to work fast. The initiative will be right behind us. They began setting up the resonance equipment, using technology from multiple time periods. The temporal beacon pulsed in sync with their preparations, its symbols now forming complete sentences, the full message Nathan's original self had tried to send. Nathan, Lyra called out softly. Look at this. She projected a hologram showing the complete temporal map. The pattern, it's not just your consciousness encoded in the frequency. It's everything. Every human consciousness, every possible version of reality, all compressed into a single quantum signal. A backup, Nathan realized. Not just of humanity, but of existence itself. Insurance against what's coming. The facility shook as temporal tears began forming around them. Through the lab windows, they could see the ocean itself starting to unravel, water turning to quantum foam at the edges of reality. Multiple temporal signatures detected, the lab's AI announced. Initiative forces approaching from all time streams. Nathan grabbed the quantum drive containing their research. We need to. The air exploded inward as initiative troops arrived from multiple periods simultaneously. Their leader stepped forward, a man whose features seemed to be constantly shifting between different possibilities. Dr. Rhodes, he said, his voice echoing with temporal harmonics. The man who started it all. We've been chasing you across time itself. You don't understand what you're fighting against, Nathan said. No, you don't understand what you're fighting for. The leader's form stabilized, revealing a face Nathan recognized, his own, twisted by temporal corruption. I am you, from a future where we succeeded. Where we controlled the tears instead of fearing them. You're a temporal echo, Lyra said. A shadow of a possibility that should never be. I am inevitability. The corrupted Nathan raised his weapon. The frequency isn't meant to save reality. It's meant to control it. To make us gods. The real Nathan looked at the temporal beacon, then at Lyra. In that moment, he understood what his original self had realized. Why the frequency had been scattered through time. Why reality itself was trying to tear itself apart rather than allow what the initiative wanted. You're right about one thing, he said. I did create the frequency to change reality, but not to control it. He reached for the quantum synthesizer. To free it. Before the initiative forces could react, Nathan activated the original frequency. But this time, he added something new, the resonance cascade equation, completed by knowledge from across time itself. The sound that filled the lab was unlike anything that had ever existed, a harmony of all possible frequencies, all possible realities, all possible consciousnesses. The temporal beacon exploded with light as the signal amplified through every temporal node simultaneously. No, the corrupted Nathan fired, but his weapon dissolved into quantum particles. His form began to break apart as the timeline he represented ceased to exist. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, everything changed. The tears in space-time didn't seal, they transformed. The boundaries between moments, between possibilities, between consciousness itself, became permeable. Not erased, but evolved. Nathan felt Lyra's hand in his as their awareness expanded. They could see everything, every version of themselves, every path not taken, every possibility that had ever or would ever exist. But instead of chaos, there was harmony. Instead of destruction, transformation. The frequency hadn't been a warning or a weapon. It had been an invitation to become something more than what they were. To stop fighting the inevitable evolution of reality and instead embrace it. In the altered space-time of what had once been Nathan's lab, past and future versions of humanity began to merge and transform. The initiative's forces dissolved as their timelines were rewritten, not destroyed but reformed into something new. "Is this what you saw?" Lyra asked, her consciousness now intertwined with all other possibilities of herself. "What your original self planned?" "Yes," Nathan said, understanding finally complete. The tears weren't the problem, they were the solution. Reality wasn't breaking down. It was breaking through. The temporal beacon gave one final pulse before dissolving into pure quantum energy. Its last message hung in the transformed air. The frequency was never meant to save what was. It was meant to birth what could be. End of transmission. Beginning of everything else. Around them, the new reality continued to evolve, consciousness and time and space becoming something else entirely. Not an ending, but a transformation. Not a collapse, but an emergence. And somewhere in the quantum harmonics of existence itself, the frequency played on, no longer a signal from the future or the past, but a symphony of all that was, is, and could be, playing eternally in the evolved consciousness of whatever humanity would become.